Good morning. Our sermon title is, what do we call this? One of my heroes in faith is St. Augustine. Augustine never hid who he was. He had made bad choices in his life. He had done things that had set him far from God. At times, he didn't even want to know God. He went with different circles of people who beliefs were far from Christian, we would say. He put intellectual pursuits and pursuits of wealth and relationships, lustful relationships, ahead of his faith. Yet he's never scared to share that. He's never scared to share who he was. He always considers himself on a journey in his writings. That his life is a journey. That his life shows how God was working. Whether it be through deaths of friends or family members, or chance meetings with church officials or other believers, Augustine always shows that he's on a journey of faith. When he finally becomes Christian, he heads back to his native South Africa. And he's just intent on being a Christian. Augustine really thought he could not continue his career as a professor, as a teacher, and still work on himself as a Christian. So he went back to South Africa to just work on being a Christian. But yet while he was there, he went to church one day in Hippo. And the bishop was there, and the bishop recognized him and knew of him. Augustine did have a reputation as a teacher, as an intellectual. And at that point in time, once the bishop pointed him out to the congregation made him a priest. Right then and there. That was his ordination and installation. And that started Augustine's clergy career. But for Augustine, life each day was a reason to celebrate God's grace. Each day was a new day to see miracles, to see God work, to see God take who he was and make that person into something great and marvelous. In ancient Israel, there was a tradition to when they thought they saw God move, they would build an altar. Whether it be at the Jordan or in the wilderness or wherever they saw the presence of God in some real form, whether it be parting the Jordan, manna from heaven, the quail from heaven, whatever it might be, they would build an altar. But as they moved into the Promised Land, these altars for remembrance stopped being made so frequently. The Promised Land was now the altar. People could know that God was with them by just looking at their surroundings. Knowing that God had led them out of Egypt, knowing that God had led them through the desert and into the Promised Land. They didn't need a bunch of altars around them to remind them of that. At least at first, anyway. As we sit at the beginning of Holy Week, with Palm Sunday being next Sunday, what do we call this Sunday? This Sunday just another Sunday? Do we really not start thinking about Christ's death and resurrection until Palm Sunday? Is that the proper thing to do? I think most of us would say no. I think most of us would say we could think about the death and resurrection of Christ any day. But do we? Through Christ's death and resurrection, we do now live in the promised land. We live in this new covenant that Jeremiah was speaking of. We look around us, and the world we live in, the people that are around us, even ourselves, are under this new covenant. But for some reason, through history, we decided we needed altars to remind us. We needed days like Palm Sunday, Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Sunday to remind us. And while these are great holidays and great times for meditation, celebration, and fellowship, if our faith was perfect, if we were walking step by step with Christ, will we need them? Wouldn't every day be our Palm Sunday? Wouldn't every day be our Maundy, Thursday? Wouldn't every day be our Good Friday, Easter, and Easter Sunday? But yet our lives get in the way. Much like the Israelites. Where they lived in this promised land, they could see the temple. They could live around these sites and around these places that they know God had moved. But yet that wasn't enough for them. That wasn't enough. They let earthly pursuits cloud their vision. While they went around this promised land, instead of seeing images of God's triumph, they only saw what was in it for them. Where's a field I can plow? Where's people I can sell my goods to? What neighboring countries do we need to make relationships with? How do I show them I'm like them? How do I not let my faith scare them off? That's what they begin to think and see. Instead of walking around this promised land and saying, over there's where King David built the temple and Solomon finished. Over there is where God told Abraham he did not have to sacrifice Isaac. Instead of looking around and seeing those things, they were just concerned about the worldly stuff. And Jeremiah said, because you cannot see God's presence through the old covenant, the covenant of the law that Moses gave to you, God will show you a new covenant that you cannot ignore. Jesus said the same thing to his disciples. Jesus was very clear to them about what was happening. and what was going to change. Do we hear these words of Jesus? Do we hear him saying the time has come in our lives where we no longer have to live under our old lives, but we can live in the new life he has given us? Christ's death and resurrection gives us an altar to look to each day. We can mentally vision that cross and that empty tomb and know that every day is a day we're in God's presence. Let us remember that every day of our lives, not just through the end of the Lenten season, but every day.